Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Charity Charge Show. I'm your host, Stephen Garton. Today, I'm excited to have Tom Nardacci, who is the executive director of the Regional Food Bank in New York. Tom, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, Stephen, thanks for having me. We really appreciate the invite and appreciate all the good work you do.
Well, thank you so much for doing that. And I appreciate a little bit of the kindred spirit and connection we have. I know we were just chit-chatting about our ties to Syracuse University. So
Yeah,
go
upstate New
Orange.
York people from SU are all over the country. There's a road through upstate New York that you can find people all over the place. So it's a great place to be an alum of.
There's a few themes and questions that I have and why we wanted to feature your organization and your work on the Charity Charge show. But I really believe in the power of organizations and nonprofits to innovate and come up with unique ways to solve society's problems. And I really, first, if I just wanted to jump into it, let me actually take a step back before I'm getting really excited here. Can you just talk to us a little bit about Regional Food Bank and kind of the origins and what the mission is of the organization?
Yeah, sure. No, like I said, I appreciate all the work you do, highlighting other nonprofits, leaders around the country. It's really great to see. There are a lot of innovative people in the nonprofit world, and there's a lot of good things that are happening in our space. Food banks are all across the country. There are 200 across America. All of us are part of a national organization called Feeding America. But every food bank's different. So I like to say if you've seen one food bank, you've seen one food bank. Everyone does it a little differently. We're our own nonprofits. But all of us have a defined service area. So in New York State, there are 10 food banks, for example, and we all have a defined service area. So you mentioned Syracuse. Syracuse has its own food bank in central New York. Our food bank runs from just north of New York City to the Canadian border. So we incorporate 23 counties, and it's about 41% of the land mass in New York State. People who aren't from New York, they think of New York City when you talk about New York, and people who haven't been to New York, they don't realize how big of a state New York actually is. So our food bank's quite large. By distribution, we're the third largest food bank in our state. So there's two food banks in New York City that are very large. Obviously, the city is a huge population center. So there's two food banks, and then we're the third largest in the state. Our organization's been around for 40 years. So we've had I'm the third executive director. We had a founding executive director who was here for a number of years, and then we had someone who was here for a couple of years in between. So there's a lot of things that I've had an opportunity to change and innovate and kind of move things along, and really looking at other food banks around the country and seeing what people are doing.
That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. And in doing my research on your organization, the numbers that I'll share that I found quite staggering is your organization is helping feed over 350,000 people every single month. So that's just the scale that you're operating at is quite unbelievable. So hats off to you for being able to do that and fulfill on that. I'm curious too. I say this every day because the sheer diversity of organizations in the nonprofit community, there's over 2 million registered nonprofits in the United States. And I say the same thing that if you've talked to one nonprofit, you've talked to one nonprofit because oftentimes, obviously, on the pure, if you zoom out to 40,000 feet, the passion, the mission, trying to help others, that's what this sector is all about. But when you drill down to the specific niche, how they're providing the support, the leadership styles, you find such diversity. And also for your organization, I mean, having only three executive directors in that many decades is actually quite rare. The turnover rate traditionally in the nonprofit sector is about twice the for-profit sector. So I'm curious for you coming in as a new executive director, having this strong legacy, what were some of the things that you felt the organization had in place and was doing really well? And then what are some of the areas where you brought change and innovation?
Yeah, I think first let me just start by saying, in terms of scale, whenever someone walks into a food bank for the first time, they're stunned. They're stunned at how big of an operation a food bank is. Our food bank works with 1,000 agency partners, so 500 food pantries, 200 soup kitchens, 200 other 300 other community programs. We supply them. So, like in terms of scale, people are really stunned at how large food banks are. And look,
And
it's
I
sad.
was shocked by that model too. I mean, we here in Austin, around the corner is Central Texas Food Bank, where we volunteered with and been involved with. And yeah, when I first got into working with nonprofits, I didn't quite understand the model of all the partner agencies and kind of the whole kind of life cycle of actually getting food and helping the end person. So
And there's a whole charitable food system. By the way, I was just in Texas. I visited the North Texas Food Bank, and I visited Tarrant. So you have really good food banks in Texas doing really good work. It's one of those things that if our organization didn't exist, these smaller pantries and even large pantries, I mean, I don't know how they would access the food they need. When we have agency partners that serve 40 people, and we have some that serve 10,000 a month. So it's also a bunch of it's a variety of scale. So I think the scale is something that's surprising to people. In terms of coming into the food bank as a new executive director, the one thing that is like in our DNA, and I think that most charitable organizations have this, is the commitment to mission, right? So that's something that I walked in here knowing that there was a deep commitment, and we had people who had been here a long time who were deeply committed. So coming new, and we'll get into it in a little bit, but I didn't come from the nonprofit background. Had a for profit background, and so I think coming in here, I really was just trying to assess, okay, what are the things that are working? The commitment to mission. We had some long serving people who are deeply committed, but then there were a lot of opportunities to change and grow. So even though we're a nonprofit, all in, we're about $100 million organization. It's large in scale, and so it operates in many ways like a large business. It's a large logistics business. It's a large food acquisition business. We purchased $14 million worth of food. We had donated $50 million worth of food a year. I mean, there's a lot of for-profit things in here. A lot of things that a for-profit organization does that our food bank does. So it's trying to get my arms around all those things. I've been here 3 years now. So some of it is very basic, which is building processes and systems. So some of it's like documentation of like SOPs, things that like people just always knew because they all had worked here together, right? So, well, people are retiring and new people are coming in and we're expanding. How do you train people? So I think that's like on the base level. But then there's other things we've done that are really exciting that I think other food banks are starting to look at us and starting to model after some of the things we're doing. Is I was able to bring someone in here who's an expert in data and analytics. Someone who had worked for GE locally and someone who had worked for another for-profit food organization, and was able to recruit this person in. And we built a whole new data and analytics team so that every decision we're making is really data, looking at census tract for food insecurity, looking at overlays of service, what services are in those areas, looking at our inventory, what are we buying, what do we need, what things do we have certain times a year, look at our volunteer hours, looking at our financial modeling. So kind of bringing that real world for profit expertise to this space. And I think that that's something and why do that? Well, it makes us better, right? It doesn't, yes, you can do a lot of things with heart, but also we want to be good stewards of our organization's financials. We want to be good stewards of people's generosity. So it's like making sure that we're doing things as business oriented as we can.
I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, that has definitely been one of the common threads that I've seen of successful organizations that are growing and would be at the scale that you're at, is really thinking like a for-profit and thinking and realizing that nonprofit is just a tax designation, and that type of theme. Something else that you mentioned, which I'd love to get your thoughts on. The most successful organizations that I've seen are the ones that really embrace collaboration and don't come at running their organization from a scarcity mindset, from resources and from funding, but figure out a way to rising tide raises all ships, and how can 1 + 1 = 3. And so I'm just curious your perspective on the collaborative approach and not just trying to have an ego and do it all yourselves. Can you talk a little bit about the importance and just some of the things you've seen? And I'm obviously leading you. If there's any pushback you have as well of sometimes kind of doing it yourselves too, that's fine as well. But yeah, can you talk a little bit about the collaborative approach that you all have?
Yeah, I think that's central to the charitable food system, right? It's a very delicate ecosystem. We have our food donors, right? We have our corporate partners, we have our suppliers, we have our donors. I mean, it's a delicate kind of balance. We have other people in the charitable food system. We have our pantries, we have our coalitions, we have our local governments, we have our state government, we have our federal government, we have our kind of municipal level government. So I spend most of my time on that, on collaborative things, right? Like what can we do collaboratively? What are the conversations that we can have together? What's the collective look like? How can we improve things collectively? And that's important, I think, especially for a food bank, because we operate in a lot of ways at scale. there's our surveys are always really positive. High percentage of people are happy with the work we do at the food bank. Our partners are happy, but there are those critics of food banking that says, "Well, it's too big and like it's it's patriarchal." And I think that's something that I'm sensitive to because I want to make sure that we're here to be of service. And we're not also not trying to Bigfoot organizations that are rooted in their communities. We're not trying to do a good example is 20% of the food we distribute is directly distributed, meaning that we go directly and give it out to people in need versus going through our agencies. And that wasn't the case before COVID. I think COVID and the pandemic opened up eyes that there were gaps in service. And so we're trying to identify and using this data model, trying to identify where are there gaps of service, and then that's where the food bank can go do some direct distributions. Sometimes it's in neighborhoods that have strong pantries, right, and it has strong programs. There's just too many people for those agencies to serve, right? So we want to try to do things that are additive. What we don't want to do is we don't want to come into a community and say, well, we're just going to start doing it, and then kind of run over the local community-based organizations. So I think that's where we got to be collaborative. Also, I think working with government. I think in New York State, especially, New York State is a state that the government does a lot, right? The state government does a lot. Our local counties do a lot, and there's some other states that the government provides little to no support for food banks. So I think it's something that we're constantly talking to our state government and state government leaders about issues and really trying to get resources from them, trying to get them to fund things to try to come up with some new money. And last year, New York State did that. New York State has some really good programs that they've created, but also stepped up and have done additional emergency funding. And we're also working at local levels, and we started to have conversations with local mayors, right? To say, look, mayor, I know your whole where people in need live, but let us show you kind of some more data, right? So we're trying to be a resource for municipalities because look, mayors are worried about many things, right? And some mayors are super focused on economic development or they're super focused on paving their streets or whatever, plowing the roads. And they don't necessarily have the bandwidth or the staff to deal with issues like this. So we get to walk in and say, look, we have all the information. We want to work with you and help you. And I think that's like a real local level collaboration that we're excited to do more,
I
things like that.
I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, if I could interject and kind of use this also as a moment to share some wisdom out to other nonprofit leaders that are listening to this and whatever type of organization they're running, I think a real gem that you shared there, obviously, you first were talking about having the data and having the analytics. And I think it's pretty clear that over the decades, your organization has been able to diversify its funding sources, right? And I think a lot of people that are starting out or running an organization and are maybe struggling from a fundraising perspective are so single tracked on getting where the funds are. But I always tell people to try to also follow the money, but also show that you have the infrastructure and the wherewithal to solve the problem. So I love what you're talking about there of bringing the data, right? And then also going to where there could be dollars at these local, state, federal levels to be able to show them that you can really be a partner for them to help them further whatever their initiatives are and kind of supporting people in their community. Um, and you can be the doer of that. I think that's a really, really good point.
Yeah, and I think and I'll echo that because I think walking into this organization from the outside, I was able to look at the financial modeling in a certain way. I started businesses from scratch, right? So like, how do I grow my business? How do I generate revenue? Who are my customers? Are there opportunities to expand in this area or this area? So I kind of came with almost 20 years of that experience trying to figure out how to balance my own books and how to make my businesses work. So when I came here, I kind of looked at, okay, these are the kind of standard funding streams that this organization has gotten through the years, and we've expanded that. So beyond government, because New York's not every state is the same, but in New York there's opportunity. So I identified that as an opportunity zone for this organization. That look, there are more funds available through the public sector, but also foundations. I had our team. We created an institutional giving department, right? So I brought someone in that had worked at a foundation because I also identified that we weren't raising enough money from foundations. And some organizations they don't go after government money, they don't go after foundation money because there's a grant making process, right? So grants and foundations, I realized, was another area for us to grow. And we've grown that over the last 3 years exponentially. And basically our team developed a list of every foundation in our service area, and then went through every single one and said, okay, these are the ones that would fund food
Mhm.
related causes. And then we just started going kind of foundation by foundation and making introductions. There's a sales cycle here, right? So I'm kind of talking business on the business side, but there's a sales process here, and we're identifying those. And we've built really strong. We've had some real success there, where we've had some capital investments made from new foundations, as well as like multi-year funding commitments from these foundations. Because we found foundations that care about our cause. So I think that's another one. And then the other thing is like using data, analyzing where our donors are coming from. Our service area is really big, right? So like Albany is the capital of New York State. It's kind of the capital region, is the center of our service area. But going south, just north of New York City, there's enormous pockets of wealth. People who don't live in the city, who live just outside New York but have New York money, are there, right? And I think that we've started to identify over the last few years in a more consistent way those types of donors and getting them more activated. So we realize that, look, in these certain counties, these geographic areas were underperforming in terms of donors. So we're specifically looking to grow donations in that area as well. But I agree. So you have to diversify revenue. And I think that nonprofits sometimes get caught up in the same thing. Well, we've always gotten this certain level of funding, and all of a sudden that gets cut, and they get lost.
Totally. I appreciate you sharing that. I'd like to also, as you were talking about figuring out how to find whether it's foundations or it's, wealthy individuals or any individual for that matter that can support your cause. I think back, something that really changed my life. The school that I went to had the K through 12 school or first to 12th grade that I went to in Baltimore County had a program that every to graduate, you had to fulfill a certain number of community service hours. And my friend and I donated or volunteered our time rather as in junior and senior year of high school to a food bank in Baltimore City, excuse me, a soup kitchen, it was rather called Paul's Place. And that was my first real up close. I mean, we were there washing dishes and serving food and sweeping the street and doing all sorts of things like that. And when I reflect back on it, I mean, these were people that were homeless that this might have been their only meal for the day. And I think also I'm kind of getting at is when I think more as things have evolved over the past 20 plus years and we think about food insecurity, I think that there's obviously a stratification in the economy, right? Of the haves and haves not, or the people that are doing really well and the people that are not doing so well financially. So I'm curious if you can just talk for a little bit when you think about the 350,000 people a month that you're supporting, who are they and what are they going through? Because I don't think that it's just people that are homeless. I think that there's a lot of people out there struggling that for people that are listening to this podcast, they might just not be aware of or really resonate with the need across obviously your state and the 23 counties that you're supporting, but from a more macro perspective, even within the United States. Can you talk to us a little about food insecurity and how that the different types of people that are struggling with that?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great topic to talk about, because I think people still aren't too sure, like, okay, who are these 350,000 people? First of all, let me just acknowledge you volunteering in high school. Another resource, by the way, we talked about money, volunteers and teaming up with local schools. We can't do what we do here without volunteers. I mean, we have 4 shifts a day, 7 days a week sorting food at our food bank, and that's all volunteer powered.
Yeah.
So we spend a lot of time
And I
trying to
tell you
recruit,
too, like
and
for
starting
me,
young, by the way.
it was life-changing for me, okay, because I was very fortunate. I never worried about what meal was gonna come next, and I've supported them a little bit over the years, and I'm gonna be continuing to support them more and more, this organization that I volunteered with as a teenager. So it was a really great I got something out of it, and then now I'm able to give back as well, so it's really good.
I love it. And by the way, the generational shift too, start young, right? Young people coming up today, they wanna play a role. They wanna be involved. They want a cause. It's more than just I want a job. They wanna contribute. And we find that with our younger employees too. So I think that's super important. So in terms of who's seeking assistance, a majority of people who go to the local food pantry visit one time a month, maybe twice a month. Uh, so that's not someone who's homeless. That's not someone who has no other place to eat. Now, we do serve a lot of people at missions and at shelters and kind of emergency feeding programs that do serve that population. But a vast majority of people work. Most people work 2 jobs. So who's coming? Someone's coming, it's a single mom with 3 kids who had to pay her rent this month. So she just needs to come and get a bag of groceries to just help. It's a senior citizen who they get their Social Security check. Maybe they don't have a pension. They're trying to decide, hey, my heat bill is way high. I have medication. I'm just gonna have to go without food. So they're picking up a bag of groceries kind of once or twice a month. It's kids. 1 in 7 kids in our service area is food insecure. So even at the most wealthiest school districts in our service area, we have kids that go home every week with a backpack of food. At the wealthiest school districts, people would never know that kids at that school that their kids go home with a bag of groceries every week, every Friday. So majority of people are just, and you said it right. Look, the gap is widened, right? There's the middle class is, we could talk economics, but the middle class is disappearing, right? And you have people who are doing very, very well, and you have people who are doing very, very bad, and people in the middle, it's hard for them to keep up. And just if you look at any of the numbers, like dollars just don't go as far. You buy $400 worth of groceries, and your cart's not even full. The price of food is so high. At one point here, eggs were $7 a dozen. I mean, it's just, and now it's down again, but it's when eggs are $7, a lot of people don't buy eggs. It's just people are making those choices. And I think there's a lot of people who are lucky that say they do well, they've done well, and they don't think about what they put in their grocery cart. I grew up in a family, my mom had coupons and she had a limited budget. This is what I have to spend every week, and that was it. And I remember being in the grocery store with her and putting stuff back because it didn't hit that number. But even then, $40 went really far. She could fill up her cart for that amount. And and so I think that's mostly who we're helping. Mostly people who just they're in between. My car broke down. I'm in between jobs. It's really people who just need a little lift once or twice a month. And the other thing, even thinking about growing up as a kid, we didn't have social services organizations that were so public. We didn't have pantries that were kind of right in the neighborhood. Our food pantry in our neighborhood was in the church, in the basement, go around the back. And we've really tried to destigmatize people needing help. And I think that that's in many sectors, beyond just people needing help with food. It's mental health services and health services. It's a lot of other things. So I think it's good. I think it's good that we help people when they need it.
I appreciate you sharing that. I wanted to shift gears talking about some of the initiatives that you've brought. Can you talk to us a little bit about your agricultural hub initiative?
Yes, as we talked about earlier, looking at the food bank and saying, okay, where can I innovate? What things might be, what are opportunity areas? New York State, upstate New York has a lot of farms. There are things that New York ranks nationally in many categories in terms of farming, which some people who've never been to New York maybe don't understand that. We have 30,000 farms in the state of New York. And in our service area, we have 10,000 farms. So we work with about 100 of those farms. So I viewed it as an opportunity for us to do more, to access more, working closer with the New York farming community. We have great relationships here. We do a lot in dairy. We do a lot with raw vegetables. But really the focus is over the next 5 years is us trying to access more farm fresh food. And I think it does a few things. I think one, it allows us to get the most nutritious, locally sourced food available to people in need. Two, I think that it's a support for local farmers. Majority of those farms are family farms, a lot of small farms. So we're really happy with the farms that we do work with, and they're happy with the relationship they have with us. We also have really good relationships with larger kind of agribusiness. Chobani Yogurt is a great friend to food banks in New York State. Chobani's an upstate New York company. They've done amazing things on a global scale. So trying to work more with producers like Chobani that support local dairy farmers. So that's something we're looking to do more of. And the hub is not a hub in terms of a physical building. We have the buildings, we have the cooler capacity. It's more so utilizing our existing logistics to acquire this food. And we're talking at a scale that's significant. We're talking, could we bring in another 10 million pounds of food annually? That's from the agricultural community. And then we're doing things like, instead of sourcing food and bringing it to our warehouse and distribution center, we're buying food from local farmers and having that food directly brought to local pantries. So that's keeping food in the community. Because what happens too is that you have these like agricultural communities that produce a lot of food, and all the food gets exported. it all gets exported from a county, for example. So it's like, can we buy that food? Can we source that food in that county, keep it in that county? Keep it in that school district so that the farm that's near the school is getting that school is getting food from that farm. So it's really exciting. It's something that we're developing over the next few months, launching next year. Other food banks do similar things across the country, but also it's like a lot of our food we get sourced from our corporate partners, from our food industry partners. This is another avenue for us to source more food.
That's awesome. How did this initiative, was it kind of looking at the data, or how did this kind of idea percolate to your team and you all figure out it's something worth exploring?
Yeah, it's one of those things like, so I mentioned New York State has really good funding sources. So New York State has a program called Nourish New York that was created during the pandemic that gives money to food banks to buy from New York farmers and producers. So we already had a certain scale to our relationships with farmers and producers, and I got here and I said, this is the best program we have, that we're buying as local as possible, because there's also shipping costs, trucking costs, bringing stuff across the country. We're always going to need citrus from Florida. We're always going to have to get strawberries from California, stuff from the Midwest. So we're always going to have to ship things around the country. But how can we keep food as local as possible? So it's taking that model that we've done over the last 5 years and scaling it. And I think that's how we got into it started. And I visited some farms, and I have some farmers that are on my board and really kind of tap their knowledge base. Some of our apple farmers, New York apples, for example, no disrespect to the state of Washington, there's no better apples than New York State apples. So why wouldn't I have New York State apples throughout our facilities?
That's awesome. Appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
You had talked a little bit about your for-profit experience as an entrepreneur, right? I'm curious, what has been over the years? By the way, we just yesterday celebrated our 10-year anniversary since I started Charity Charge. So
that's huge. That's a big milestone. Congrats.
Yeah, it's something that it was a number of years in. I read some statistic about the success rate of businesses getting to be in 1 year in business, 3 years, 5, 10, and stuff like that. So it was definitely a milestone I was looking forward to. Given your significant for-profit experience that you're bringing into the nonprofit side, I'm curious, how, if at all, has your leadership style changed from just like who you are and how you're trying to get everyone to row in the same direction and accomplish goals, work together? What are some of the things you've learned over the years in either of these industries? And how does that look like today for the organization from a leadership perspective?
I think the best thing I brought to this organization was my ability to build teams and the ability to put people in the right places, right? So Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, Small Giants, Paul Burlingame's book. There's just things that I put into practice in my businesses that I was able to bring here to the nonprofit sector. And just identifying talent, for example. So I met a guy that worked in our, but he had a previous position where he was doing data analytics. So I got him out of our freezer and I put him in front of a computer, right? So it's this identifying talent. But then also building a positive workplace. This is a food bank, right? People do feel really good about what they do, and they go home and they know they did well. But there's challenges like any business and organization. But I think really giving people a voice, giving people safe spaces to complain if they need to ask for changes if they need them. So I think I bring that mindset, and I think that's been really helpful. Is that I do believe a positive workplace is a more productive workplace. And but also too, like accountability. So balancing the positivity with accountability is that, look, when I got here, we had people that were here for a long time who weren't great and that were holding the organization back. And then we did have some departures. And I think that's okay and that's healthy. So I think that balance, that's the biggest thing. And then I think too, just that mindset of like, listen, being a connector. I've spent a career connecting people and connecting organizations. So I think that's been very naturally ported over to this organization, being able to connect with people, not who you get to know, getting to meet new people and giving them a chance to participate.
Appreciate you sharing that point. I want to just look back here to my notes, just keep me honest here. One of the notes that Grayson had put here, and it was obviously the months kind of blur and the years in some respects blur together, but maybe within the past year or so, there was a pause, correct me, obviously in where I'm wrong, but there was a pause and a lot of concern about reduction in federal funding and SNAP.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what I'm really curious is how did your organization potentially anticipate that and think about working through those issues and funding gaps and whatnot?
Yeah, similar to working with private, when you work with public sector funding, priorities are going to shift, right? And I think that's something that I kind of learned that a long time ago. I had served on some nonprofit boards, and I grew up in a Boys and Girls Club. I had served on our Boys and Girls Club board for a long time. Federal funding streams changed, and then that funding that Boys and Girls Club had always gotten was no longer available. And then that Boys and Girls Club had a huge scramble because they had never raised money privately, right? They had always just relied on that kind of government source. So like that was a long time ago, 20 some years ago, kind of learned that example. So I think that the federal government had reduced funding for USDA commodities. USDA commodities are very important to us, right? That food banks across the country have access to protein, to fruits and vegetables from all over the country. It's an national agricultural initiative. The funding still exists at a certain level, so we're working with what's available, trying to push back to make sure that it doesn't get cut further. But so that was one thing that had changed. So what we had to do is we had to make up the pounds. And so we went to our private sector partners, we went to our donors, and we tried to increase donated product. And while we didn't get the full amount that we had lost, we still had to purchase more food. So I think there's some ways that, we balance things, we rebalanced, I'd say. In the fall, when the federal government was debating the budget, look, budget season at the federal level, at the state level, there's always a lot of uncertainty. And this was the first time ever that SNAP, which is support for people in need, the old food stamps program, was on the table to be cut, right? It was going to not be included in the budget, and there was going to be a delay in SNAP payments. And I think that's one that would have been it did send shock waves across the country. Luckily, the Congress and the president had come to terms and negotiated to include it, and they did extend it, so it actually never ended up getting fully cut, but certainly created a crisis. And it was a crisis that lasted for many months after the fact. And SNAP is super important to this country, and I kind of made the case that, look, if there were no SNAP benefits, we would only have enough food to provide people on SNAP for a month and a half. We just could never source enough food to make up for SNAP. And so luckily, we were vocal about it, and we responded. We did direct distributions to neighborhoods where there were high participants of SNAP. Food pantries that had there's kind of a run on food pantries by people who had SNAP, were afraid they were going to lose their SNAP benefits. So we spent many months kind of re-inventorying those food pantries, partners, and so that's something that we're going to continue to do throughout the year. But the response was immediate, and that was one that our response was featured nationally. Good Morning America actually came through to one of our distributions in Newburgh and showcased kind of the work we were doing at the community level, which I think was positive. It was a positive showcase of, okay, there's a potential national crisis. How do we mobilize? And that's what food banks, I think, are really good at. We're really good at mobilization in times of need.
Got it. That's pretty cool. I appreciate you sharing that story and how you guys were able to think in a creative way and how to solve the problem and just kind of work towards it. You mentioned 2 books. I'm curious to kind of close out this episode. You mentioned two books and 2 authors, Jim Collins and Bo Burlingame, 2 people I'm familiar with as well. And at least The Good to Great, my recollection, has been a long time since I've read it, is kind of the strategy, the tactical, like kind of learning from how other businesses have been successful, why others have failed. For me, over the past decade, the mechanics have been really important in some of those principles, but then it's come down to the psychology of how do I get past concerns, worries, frustrations, fear of failure, things like that. I'm just curious, like genuinely, given your multi-decade experience leading and running organizations, for-profit, now non-profit, what are the things you tell yourself, or when you're struck with like a huge crisis or a huge challenge, how are you able to stay steadfast and resilient? Are there any psychological things, faith, what have you, that you lean on to just pull you through challenging times?
Yeah, and I think that's great. That's a great question, very insightful. And part of what I've liked about the Jim Collins books is really about finding good people and putting them in the right places. I've spent a lot of time over the last 3 years building a really good team around myself, right? It's like hire smarter people than you and like, trust them. It's like knowing we need a data person, hiring that guy, knowing I can't direct a warehouse, I need someone who knows logistics, finding someone that's got that expertise. And so it's really trusting people. And I think that's a big part of leadership. And I learned that a long time ago. My first business, I had a board of advisors and I was kind of like one man band doing everything, running around, but I couldn't grow. And I was trying to figure out why I couldn't grow. And this board of seasoned business people are like, listen, you gotta step back. You gotta let people take over. And and it was really hard as a startup to say, well, wait, you want me to give up things? Like, how is that going to work? How do I know it's going to be good? How do I know that everything's going to be produced the way I want? It's something that I learned early on that I've carried throughout my career, is that you have to find really good people and you have to trust them, and people with different talents. I think that's one thing that I do, is I do lean on other people, and then I lean on collective wisdom, right? So like I do seek out people's advice, and I'm a leader who I don't want to surround myself with sycophants, and I don't want people around me who would just are generating praise. I want people who challenge each other, and we have a good executive team that, look, we'll go in the room, we'll go on a retreat, and we'll hash it out, we'll disagree, and then when the door opens, we go out as a team. And I think that that's something that I've instilled, that level of trust, that listen, you can say whatever you want in this room. When we go out in the world, let's be unified. And I think that that's something that you got to, as a leader, you got to check your ego sometimes. And I definitely have tried to do that through the years.
That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. It's good for me to hear too. I'm curious, as you kind of look the next like year, 3-year, 5-year, 10 years, what are some of the things that are exciting you the most about initiatives that you're planning, or just the future of tackling food insecurity at the food bank?
I think, so I've been here 3 years now. I just signed a 3-year contract to stay for 3 years, because I do think that stabilization is important. You mentioned that, the turnover in the nonprofit sector. I went to my board and they had never had a contract for the executive director here. And I said, look, I think it's important for us to stabilize things. Yeah, things are going well. And not to say I'm looking to leave in 3 years. I mean, I'm still in my 50s trying to figure out what I'm going to do next. But I think providing stabilization over the next few years is very important. I feel really positive because I've actually learned how to food bank, right? I mean, it's such a unique industry that it takes a little bit to like wrap your head around the whole thing. And now I finally, 3 years later, I feel like I've done some battles, I've been through some wars, I did some budgets, I've had some board turnover, I've had some staff turnover. Now I feel like I'm kind of catching my rhythm after a few years, so I'm excited for the next few years for that. Also learning from other food banks. I've traveled the country. The Feeding America network's amazing. We're able to learn from each other. The CEO network is super open and engaged. We're trying to, for example, develop a policy. How do we use AI? Well, I told my team, I said, instead of us writing it from scratch, why don't we see what food banks have done this work? And reaching out to the network and getting feedback on things that they're doing. So I think learning from other food banks, seeing other food banks, and then really it's like the best part about my job is that any day that I think I'm having a bad day, any day, any week that's a little challenging, I'm lucky that I can just go out in the community and I can do a direct service. I can go to a food pantry and I can participate. I can just take my food bank shirt off and go volunteer. I can go out in a warehouse and I can sort food with school kids. So I mean, that's the best part about this job, is like there is no lack of like ability to like feel good about yourself. And every day when I leave here, I think that I'm like, man, what an opportunity this is to really do something super positive. So I'm excited for the next few years to kind of do more things like that, to be out in our communities more.
Appreciate you sharing that. To close out here, Tom, I'm curious, I mean, you talked a little bit about, well, quite a bit about the regional food bank in state of New York, right? And then you've also talked about the Feeding America and that network, right? And your praise for other food banks around the country. So I'm curious, for people that are listening that are in your state or feel a close connection, what are ways that they can support your organization? And then also more broadly, can you just touch on Feeding America and how, if people are moved by your message in this episode, how can they get involved if they maybe want to get involved in their local community that might be outside of New York?
Yeah, I always say this. The first thing that someone should do is they should volunteer at their local food pantry or their soup kitchen. They should go to St. Paul's, right? They should go to that place in their neighborhood that's helping people directly in their community. So I think, to me, the number one thing to do is to help in your local neighborhood. There's no better feeling. And I still do that. On a Saturday morning, I'll go to my hometown where I grew up and I'll do a distribution. I'll help hand out food in that neighborhood. And there's no better feeling than that. I think that's number one. I think two, food banks have a lot of opportunities for people to get involved, either to volunteer and obviously to donate. People that have the means. I mean, I'm shocked. Every donor that gives us $500 or more, which is a lot, I hand sign all the letters. It's thousands, I don't even know, thousands of letters a year, especially at the holiday time. But I'm always amazed at how many people, because I know a lot of people, and I know a lot of people in our region. There's just so many people that donate that I don't know them. I never heard of them. I never met them. I know the neighborhoods they live in. Some live in very normal neighborhoods, and they're writing $5,000 checks, $2,000 checks. One woman, every appeal letter we send out, she sends $1,000 back. I know her name. I know where she lives because I see her name all the time. So people who give, and even people give at a small scale, people who give $25, people give. So I think that's a great way to help. And obviously, if people want to help on a larger scale, companies, businesses, people want to, working with an organization like Feed America gives people an opportunity to work at a grander scale. So I think it depends on kind of your means and your interests, but certainly start local, help in the region, and then national if you can.
Thanks for sharing that. And Tom, thanks for coming on this episode. I really appreciate getting to know you and learning more about, obviously, your personal story from running for-profit businesses to leading regional food bank in New York. Everything you shared has really been awesome. Thank you so much.
No, Stephen, thank you. Like I said, I watched some of your episodes. I've seen the different people you've talked to. It's amazing work. It's awesome. It's a great opportunity for us, a great platform for us to get out and talk about food banking and why it's important, and certainly showcasing our food bank particularly is much appreciated. So thank you.
Thanks. It means a lot to me. And obviously want to give a shout out to everyone who's listened along. Today's June 22nd, but yesterday, June 21st, we celebrated our 10-year anniversary. And I think probably in 2018, we launched the Charity Chart Show, the podcast, and we featured over 200 nonprofit organizations. But there's not enough people giving nonprofits the credit they deserve. And this has been a really cool and fun platform. So I really appreciate you being on here. And for everyone that's continued to listen to the show, I try to end with just telling people to charge it forward in their lives. And that's really about just sharing inspiration and trying to be a good friend and someone that people can look up to and doing the right thing. So it's really cool and special to have you on this episode, Tom. Thanks again.
Thank you, man. Take care.